Am I the asshole for cutting my sister-in-law out of my life, even if it upsets the family norms? I married into the family about a year ago. They are all a pretty tight-knit bunch, but have been exceedingly welcoming and accepting towards me. It took a while for me to warm up because I'm always hesitant around new people, but I actually have a lot of fun with them and they have gone out of their way to make me feel like part of the family. I discovered early on that my husband's family has a unique way of handling conflict, and it's in sharp contrast to the way my own family handles disagreements. My family confronts issues head-on, sometimes ending in screaming matches if it gets heated enough, and all of us tend to speak up when something is bothering us or is fundamentally hurtful to someone. Tom's family is the opposite. They rarely address anything in real time, if at all. They typically whisper about it behind each other's backs, and usually just sit in tension for extended periods of time. It's been made clear to me that the only person in his family that is directly allowed to address an issue is their dad. Everyone else follows suit. This means if he isn't saying anything, no one else does, period. The issue in all of this? My husband's sister, Margaret. I'll give you a little bit of background. She has 4 kids with her husband Corey and they have a really odd dynamic between the two of them. Margaret is the more domineering of the two, often speaking for the both of them while Corey just sort of sits there and nods along. Margaret is really prone to emotional outbursts over things that simply do not make any sense. There are so many instances of the chaos that Margaret has caused within the family that it would take an eternity to describe them all. I do have some notable ones though, repeatedly guilting people if they don't immediately drop everything to watch her 4 kids, screaming at the top of her lungs / causing a huge scene when there was tomatoes on her salad during a birthday party, regular complaining that no one helps her with anything. Her apartment, car, and kids have been almost exclusively funded by the rest of the family without any expectation of being paid back, and trash-talking her entire family publicly on social media on a regular basis. Not once has anyone ever addressed these things with her, and it's continued to escalate over time. The biggest issue right now is the rift between Margaret and the stepmom, and how that is affecting the entire family, myself included. Stepmom married into the family about 4 years ago and is one of the kindest people I have ever met, point blank period. Margaret publicly shames her at every family function and seems to specifically reach for the cruelest things you could say / do to someone. Margaret regularly asks stepmom to babysit, but freaks out when stepmom says no to any of her children. Margaret insists that this is toxic and abusive parenting. Stepmom can't have children, and Margaret has told her that she's thankful for this because it was God doing the world a favor. She's told stepmom that she was the reason her cousin killed herself. She refuses to acknowledge her as a matriarchal figure and regularly says things like, "This is my dad's house, not yours. I'm not your daughter. You'd never be fit to be a mom, and IDK why my dad even married you." Margaret has gone as far as to compare stepmom to their dad's ex-wife, who stabbed him and ended up in prison. Stepmom has reached out multiple times to try and rectify / make peace with the situation, but Margaret escalates every time she does. All of this is so absurd for a woman of her age that I can't stand it. I have kept my mouth shut for years at this point out of respect for the family norms even through all of this, but last week I decided I'd had enough. Fern called me in tears to tell me that Margaret had ruined a dinner they went to that night, again. Margaret has regularly used Fern as an emotional punching bag, and him calling me in tears is a regular occurrence at this point. At dinner, Margaret had called him fat and told him she didn't want her kids around him anymore because they would think being fat is okay. For context, Fern has struggled with an eating disorder for most of his life. On the phone call, Fern basically spilled his guts. There's a family vacation to Italy every few years and apparently stepmom isn't going anymore because of Margaret. Fern also let me know that there has been talk of cutting Margaret out of the family for years, but their dad hasn't even started the conversation of this isn't okay yet, so none of them can say anything. Fern had tried to contact the husband, Corey, to see if there was something going on, but Corey refused to talk. I have always been friendly with Corey. He's a nice guy, and if you can get to him without Margaret in the room, he's actually really full of life and fun, so I called him myself. Corey told me that everyone is being so mean to Margaret and she's trying to break generational cycles. It sounded like he had a script in front of him the whole time and was almost word for word the same nonsense that Margaret says all the time. Margaret is a victim, everyone else is crazy, no one understands her, etc., etc. After listening to him for a while, I told him I cared about him but that I was done with Margaret's BS. I blocked their numbers, their social media, and eliminated any other ways they had to contact me. This is a big no-no in this family. You don't confront it, you don't say anything, you just sit there and take it. I contacted Fern and stepmom and told them about my decision, and let them know that I wasn't going to show up to anything if Margaret was also going to be there. I told Tom and we had a whole conversation about it. Everyone is telling me they support me in my decision, but they have all also said some variation of "I wish I could do that because I am in the same boat." The subsequent backlash from all of this is that although I am maintaining relationships with the rest of the family, Margaret is even worse at functions now. I don't have to see it, but I hear about it all the time and I'm starting to wonder if I made the wrong decision. I didn't want to make it worse for anyone, but I just couldn't watch it happen anymore without escalating things, myself. It really was getting to a point where I felt so stifled that I thought I might hit her out of frustration, which is why I chose to back out after all of this. The family still hasn't said anything to her, and my husband told me that they all have a role to play, but that I also kind of disrespected his dad by saying/doing this. Tom is the only one in the dynamic that is low contact with Margaret. This happened very shortly after I entered the picture when I put my foot down over an incident that was absolutely ridiculous. Margaret had accused him of trying to kill her youngest after we lent her a carpet cleaner that smelled. I burn sage regularly. She was dead serious about it and did not let up and was like, "Wow, good to know you have no regard for human life." He broke down in tears for almost a week before I had to sit him down and tell him this is the most insane take ever. How the fuck is Sage going to kill a kid? You realize how nuts that is, right? Don't let her steamroll you like this. He went LC pretty immediately after that. Fern is a really soft-hearted person. It's been confirmed to me that growing up, Fern got it the worst from their bio mom. It's made him extra susceptible to Margaret's manipulations and guilt trips. They were really close when they were kids and Fern sometimes feels that without Margaret, his life will be empty. It causes him a lot of distress in both directions. Losing Margaret is a devastating thought to him. Staying around her causes him a lot of pain and generally puts him in a really dark place. He's struggling with it. We still talk regularly and have a very close friendship. Corey is a really soft-spoken guy. Super funny, friendly, and nice generally speaking. He only shifts gears when Margaret is present. The rest of the family has identified this as fear. I only cut him off because of the way Margaret uses him to gather information and spread drama. He deserves better, but I think we can all understand how scary it must be for him to even think about standing up to himself, considering that Margaret regularly threatens to take the kids away from someone, over something as small as not pouring her a glass of water once, roughly twice a month. Margaret has yet to actually follow through with this and genuinely only uses it as a form of control because of how effective it has been. It's like her Hail Mary pass. Mill really is a wonderful lady. She's really patient and understands how important Phil's kids are to him. She is trying her damnedest to not break up a family and I think she genuinely wishes she could also stay out of it. Margaret has fully aimed everything at her at the moment and it's put Mill in a really uncomfortable position. She's a pretty tough lady. I think she's just as bewildered as the rest of us and doesn't know what the fuck to do with the situation, because of how absolutely extreme it is. Phil is getting a lot of hate in the comments. While I am not necessarily disagreeing with the statement that he lacks a spine and is allowing it to happen, I also see the pain that this is causing him. While emotions aren't the easiest thing for him, I have to consider how absolutely triggering the whole thing is. I mean, the last time he was around this kind of person, she attempted to kill him. I know him to be an incredibly brave man, even if he doesn't always outwardly express his feelings or his opinions. It's got to be hard to juggle and wrap his head around this. He loves his wife, he loves his daughter. I agree that he should put an end to it and that it's been a long time coming, but I absolutely understand why it would be a huge hurdle for him to confront, both in real time and within himself. I tell him all the time that he's a good dad, because he is. He really is. I think in the face of a super domineering woman, after all he and the kids have been through, just really puts him in an emotional pickle. I can absolutely understand that. Bio mom is a huge piece of shit. The family really doesn't talk about it much with what they have told me. I don't blame them. Bio mom frequently told the kids that she hated them and wished they were never born. She used them as ammo to get her way with other relatives. She regularly made life a competition between herself and the 3 daughters. There are 2 more that are not in the picture that I have never met, and at times was violent with them. Fern and bio mom got into arguments on a regular basis. Fern attempted suicide several times really early in life because of how abusive the environment was. This was also the birth of his eating disorder issues, because bio mom regularly called him an ugly, useless waste of space. Tom has told me that he tried his best to stay out of the way, but that even he wasn't safe from the chaos. Oh yeah, and she regularly attacked Phil and eventually went to prison for attempted murder. Tom cut contact pretty immediately after that, followed by Margaret and Phil. Fern was the only one who tried to still have a relationship. The entire family has been absolutely NC with the biological mother and the other 2 daughters for over a decade. So as y'all know, myself, Fern and Tom had planned some Mother's Day gifts for Mill. I gotta admit, I was worried that Margaret would show up and ruin the whole thing, but it was actually a surprisingly good day, mostly because she wasn't there, which was the obvious elephant in the room the whole time. Tom worked the grill for a while and we had Mill open the gifts I had planned. It was a small pirate chest filled with letters from myself, Fern, and Tom telling her how wonderful of a mother she was. I had aged them and weathered them to look waterlogged and like they'd been around for a long time. I made her a boondoggle that said number 1 mom that had our names dangling from it. She opened the collage, the whole thing left her in happy tears, which was nice but also sad at the same time. She said, "Op, you're such a shit for making me cry," then gave me a big hug. Mill started to talk about it all. "It's been really rough and I've been having a really hard time," but it was cut off by the men fussing over the grill. I made the rest of lunch and we had a really good time for the most part. I clocked Phil's behavior in Margaret's absence. He wandered off into the yard and stood by himself for extended periods of time, staring at the ground in silence. I registered it as pain, I'm not gonna lie. It was palpable how much easier and fun and quiet the afternoon was with Margaret being intentionally excluded. I could tell that Mill really needed to talk about what was going on, especially since she was being absolutely flooded with love, in stark contrast to what she's been receiving from Margaret. I approached her towards the end of the evening. She revealed to me what she had put in the letter. Essentially, it reads something like this. "Dear Margaret, I am sorry that we are having such a hard time seeing eye to eye. I have had my conflicts with Fern and Tom in the past that we have been able to resolve. Since you do not wish to speak to me directly, I am hoping that we can communicate this way to see each other more clearly. I think you are upset with me because I married your dad, but I am not sure because you will not tell me what is wrong. I want to make peace with you, but I cannot do that with you so blatantly disrespecting me. I feel like I deserve an apology. I feel used by you, especially since I signed your lease for you when you asked right before this happened. Please write me back so we can resolve this. I love you." Apparently, Mill had Phil read it before she sent it. This looks like a last-ditch effort to rectify the tension, but I'm not sure what the outcome will be because we all know that Margaret is going to freak the fuck out the second she reads it. Margaret can't handle any blame and has no sense of accountability. We can all see it coming, so definitely expect an update on that. On the ride home I absolutely fell apart. It made me so sad that she has had to go to these lengths to remedy a situation that she didn't cause in the first place. I was also very angry at Phil and basically the whole family for letting this go on for as long as it has. I ended up confronting Tom about this again. I told him that there are 600 strangers on Reddit calling him and his whole family spineless, and that I have found myself defending them because I know otherwise, but that in this situation those 600 strangers are absolutely right. I said that I know his dad is human, but that they are all a bunch of cowards for the fend for yourself, just let it go attitude they have when it comes to each of them being so wildly abused and disrespected as a family. Fern deserves better than to have a sister that has told me that the reason Fern got SA'd as a kid is because he put himself out there like that. Excuse me? Corey deserves better than a wife who threatens to call the cops on him for not making her dinner, huh? Tom deserves a better sister than one who has called me to tell me he's a creep, and I bet he's done things to little girls before. No idea where that one came from. Mill deserves better than someone who asks her for money and favors only to turn around and rip her to shreds. The entitlement? And Phil deserves better than to have such little self-esteem that he'd rather watch his family disintegrate rather than cut out the cancer. Yeah, I was heated. Margaret makes shit up, takes things out of context, and regularly demonstrates that she genuinely feels the world is out to get her and that everyone else is the problem. I did not let up. Tom listened very patiently. We exchanged a lot of words and the conversation took over an hour, the end result being my dad is nearing approachable about this subject. Today showed him the kind of life we can have without her. You definitely launched a psychological bomb at him with how well you planned the day and how much you showed Mill that she's worth something. He's struggling, but I promise that I'll talk to him about it soon. We talk 3 times a week, he knows it's coming. The last statement I made was I am not an on-the-fence person. I'm the only one who has outright picked a side, and it's not Margaret's because I refuse to enable this insanity anymore. It's wrong, and you guys are wrong for coddling a grown woman's hurt ego knowing that it's harming literally everyone else in the family. Pick a side, and be done with it. I refuse to let Mill go this alone. We will see how much longer the circus goes on. I anticipate the events that happen this weekend leading to the biggest blow-up that Margaret has had yet. The shady online posts have already started, per Tom, who has found it amusing and low of her. It's about to get a lot crazier when this letter hits, and even worse when she eventually visits Phil and sees a giant collage with all the kids except for her.